Support for Israel's security in the Senate will be non-negotiable.
This is not your place. It's much better in Israel.
We are done with AIPAC-funded candidates that put foreign interests ahead of the interests of working Americans. You can help us beat AIPAC at their own game. Please donate to Revolutionary Change now and help us fight fire with fire. I was bat mitzvahed in Israel. I spent 6 weeks there on a high school program, planted trees in occupied territory, was used as a tool of ethnic cleansing as a teenager. And I have a lot of rage about this.
You could be white, you could be black, Hispanic, Asian, it doesn't matter. There's race hustlers all over our political arena. You know, you have the white supremacist types, and then you have the black power types that are completely corporate, like the Al Sharptons of the world. Like, there's no, that you can't, you cutting it with that knife of, oh, well, they're going to find a brown patsy. It's like, yeah, they were able to do that for a while, but you know what? When the country is suffering economically the way that it is, and now that you had this big expose, the latest expose that came out about where are all these accounts coming from, the fact that the Department of Homeland Security's social media accounts are run out of Tel Aviv, I mean, that tells you all you need to know.
China is a very interesting hybrid, you could say. Some would say that they're still transitioning towards socialism. I think Peter is a believer of that idea. I am not very convinced yet. I think there needs to be more of a stronger working class movement to push the country towards socialism. I do not see that at the moment. But what is indeed interesting in China is that the Communist Party does control the economy and also the billionaires within that economy. So it decides where to put growth. So if you need growth in green energy, China invests in that, and that has a tremendously positive impact on the society. While in the West, it doesn't matter what you want. If the billionaire class says no, it's just not going to happen.
Hong Kong is still a neoliberal hellhole city, like most places on the planet, in that there's a grotesque wealth gap. People work too hard, the rent is too damn high, et cetera, et cetera. But even this neoliberal city, the healthcare system is just so much less bad, so much better than in the US. It's not even comparable.
That we have been constantly told, oh, you don't want to know what it's like in the East. It's not that good. Trust us. You don't want it. So what are we being fed that's a bunch of BS that you guys can share living in the Far East?
Jesus, where to start? Kareem, you want to start off?
Sure. What can I say? There's so much to say. I'm from the Netherlands, by the way. I'm not from the United States, but it's also, I mean, the Netherlands is the heart of NATO. It's also the West. So I guess I speak for Peter as well.
You had healthcare, though.
What was that?
You did have healthcare, though. You know, that's something you did have that we don't have.
Yeah, but we are rapidly neoliberalizing in the Netherlands, where our healthcare also becomes extremely expensive, just like you guys. And it's a Western-wide problem, so to speak. And there are so many reasons why, in my case, I went to Asia. I think for me, the radicalizing moment was 9/11. The way our societies changed, or at least the way I started to see our society after 9/11, slowly understanding imperialism, the war addiction of the West, etc., the racism, and for me it was a kind of you could say a paradise to go to China, in this case Hong Kong, China. The society runs well. It's safe. It's clean. You have everything from cheap. The only thing that's expensive, I must say, is housing, by the way, here in Hong Kong. But when it comes to groceries, electricity, water, it's all very doable. In my opinion, I don't want to go back. So I don't know how that is for Peter, but for me, I think it's much better over here than in the West.
Are you guys both in Hong Kong? Are you both in the same? Are you both okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm almost halfway hoping that you guys don't succeed at fomenting revolution, because then I would feel honor bound to go back to help out. But no, I'm joking. That would be great. Yeah, I mean, Kareem touched on a bunch of important points. I would say, culturally, Hong Kong didn't really seem terribly different. I lived in New York for 12 years, so it kind of felt like I just moved to Far Eastern Queens, like past Flushing, much better infrastructure, no crime, no winter, et cetera, et cetera. The healthcare system here, I mean, Hong Kong is still a neoliberal hellhole city, like most places on the planet, in that there's a grotesque wealth gap. People work too hard, the rent is too damn high, et cetera, et cetera. But even this neoliberal city, the healthcare system is just so much less bad, so much better than in the U.S. It's not even comparable. I could go on for a long time, but just to maybe give you an anecdote that would really perhaps be surprising to some of your viewers. I've traveled a bit in the mainland, and one thing I hear again and again from people, they would say, this would probably surprise you, but in China, we abuse cops whenever we want. Like, we get in arguments with cops, and they can't really, do anything back to us. Whereas, I hear that and I'm like, Jesus Christ, if you try doing that in the US, you're going to get shot full of holes. Like, you can't get into arguments with cops nowadays. Some of them are will probably follow the law and not use violence on you. But as I'm sure you're aware, especially if you're melanated, arguing with the cops is a very, very, very bad idea in the US. So that's just like a little anecdote that would kind of give you an idea of how things are different from probably the dominant belief about China. But when it comes to infrastructure, yeah, it's just as good as people would get the impression of if they're just going on social media. They built an amazing high-speed rail network. You can go around the entire country by trains. I did that a few years ago. It was fantastic. Yeah. People are very friendly. It's basically like most other places on Earth when it comes to the fundamental kind of personality of people. There's no. I found traveling around the world, people are basically the same everywhere with slight cultural differences, and that's how it is in China. But I definitely recommend people come visit, because it's definitely worth a trip.
Now, I mean, how do you say a place like, I'm glad you said you've been to the mainland, because I don't think that Hong Kong is necessarily typical of China in general. But this is honestly what my beef is with China, like, and why I don't, too many people. I'm like in my life trying to get out of South Florida and move to where there's no people. My goal is to live where there's less people. And all I can think of in China is too many people. So I don't know that I would dig that, but does the infrastructure properly accommodate the population, right? So like, what's the housing situation for people or unhoused situation for people? And what's it like in terms of traffic? Because great, having a lot of people is good if the infrastructure properly accommodates the population.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Peter, go ahead.
Well, I haven't run into any massive traffic jams. I think the thing is because they've built so much infrastructure, including subway systems. All of the cities I've been to have never really been in a crazy traffic jam. Compare that with India, and if you're worried about too many people,
that's also on the list. If you were in India, that is also on the list for a lot of the same reasons. Yes, just so many people.
Yeah, I would say in general, the infrastructure build out there has made those problems, much less than you might expect. And of course, there are plenty of rural places in China with very few people. But then, of course, there are also tons of mega cities. Like on my trip back last time, I had to change my itinerary. My friend said, "Oh, why don't you just stop in Changsha, a city I'd never heard of? Get there; it's a city of 20-something million people, and that's just." Throughout the country.
I can't even imagine.
I would say it's amazing when it comes to the public transport and traffic, et cetera, at least in many places, such as Shenzhen or Hong Kong. It's cheap. It's super cheap. So you walk to the station. Within 1-2 minutes, a new train will come, or metro. It's super clean. You hop on, you hop off. It costs almost nothing. You can go anywhere. Hong Kong is a super walkable city, so you don't even need to take the train. You can take, what can I say, bridges and underground, and it's super walkable. 60% is still nature and green in Hong Kong. People always think that it is a what is it? How do you say that in English? A concrete jungle, but actually 60% is greenery over here. Yeah, very convenient in that sense. But I must admit and must say, Jen, if you are somebody who likes the quiet life, then I think you would be somebody who would be more attracted to the smaller towns that China has, but not Hong Kong.
Yeah. No, I mean, China and India are both places that I will only go to when I know someone who lives there, someone or has people there that are in the countryside and people that know their way around and know stuff, because that is definitely more my thing. Like the idea of Hong Kong to me, it's like, and I've seen videos of that city that the ground floor is the 26th floor and the trains go through like I would lose my mind. That's like Doctor Strange.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Kareem said, it is 60% park here, and there are beaches in the city limits of Hong Kong that you go to, and you might as well be in rural Thailand, like gorgeous beaches without any construction or development in sight. My contention is that Hong Kong is just objectively the most beautiful city in the world, leaving aside architecture, blah, blah, blah. If you define a city as everything contained within the city limits, you know, what other city, I don't know of any other city in the world that has the kind of natural beauty that Hong Kong has. And you just take a bus there and you're there from the city center in like an hour and 15 minutes.
Now, China has been known, obviously, through industrial growth over the last generation to have a lot of, we'll say, environmental issues, particularly with pollution. Shanghai comes to mind. Is that something that has changed for the better? Is it still a big problem? And then I also want to get your guys' opinion on food, which is a big one as well compared to the West. Well, not from the context that you're thinking of. See, my co-host partner is a smartass, and she always thinks that I'm like talking about, is this food great? No, the problem is, I see the food here in the West is poison.
I knew what you were talking about, actually.
I thought you were referring to me just trying to figure out a reason to get over there so I can.
No, but thank you to my smartass partner for just assuming when you might make an ass of you and me.
I learned that in the Marines. I love that thing. I assume, ASSU me. I love that. Yeah. Anyway, I think to answer the food question, there's a colleague of ours here at a different university, Kinchi Lau, who focuses a lot on the food system. So I would highly recommend you speak to her to get a better answer to that question. Certainly, there were massive pollution problems in major Chinese cities. The exact date range I couldn't give you, but over the past, I'd say 10 years or so, they've been doing significant efforts at cleaning up the major cities like Shanghai and Beijing. And so if you look at measurements, I think the AQI index for the major cities in China over the past 20 years or so, I think you'll basically see like an increase in pollution that peaks, I don't know, maybe early 2010s, somewhere around then. Don't quote me on that. But certainly now when you go to the major cities, it's a huge difference from a place like Bombay or Delhi in India, which hasn't had the same kind of cleanup efforts. Just one little anecdote. When I was traveling around China in, 2019, I noticed, I didn't go to any of the major cities, all like third tier, fourth tier cities, as they're called. And I noticed there was not a single gas-powered scooter. Tons of scooters everywhere, but all of them were electric. And I thought, that's weird. You know, I never heard of that. So I talked to people and they said, yeah, you know, a couple of years ago, the government had a subsidy program where we could trade in our gas-powered scooters and get a discount on electric scooters. So it's just an example of how, you know, when the government has a policy goal, they're much more open to radical policy to really accomplish something. Whereas, as you know, in the US, any sort of radical idea like that would run into all sorts of moneyed opposition. Anyone who stands to lose money from a transition to, say, electric scooters or electric cars or whatever the question is, they can put up significant roadblocks to prevent that. Whereas in China, they're like, no, we're not going to allow the power of money to easily be transferred into political power so that they can do policies like that.
Now, what do you attribute that to? I mean, obviously, everybody who is a staunch capitalist to the bitter end is going to say, well, it's communism and that's the reason. But I'm sure that's probably not the reason. There is something to be said for Eastern culture versus Western culture when it comes to the collective and recognizing what's best for society. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I would describe it as a mixture of capitalism and socialism.
Yep.
I think first of all, people who say that China is hyper communist and super socialist, I think they're being hyperbolic. I think that's way too extreme.
Well, one thing I can assure you, Kareem, that anybody who makes a statement like that has never stepped foot on China soil.
Exactly.
Guaranteed.
They don't know the definitions of these words. So, yes, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. The people who shout the loudest, Marxists, communists, often have no idea what they're talking about. But on the other hand, China is also not fully capitalist in that sense. China is a very interesting hybrid, you could say. Some would say that they're still transitioning towards socialism. I think Peter is a believer of that idea. I am not very convinced yet. I think there needs to be more of a stronger working class movement to push the country towards socialism. I do not see that at the moment. But what is indeed interesting in China is that the Communist Party does control the economy and also the billionaires within that economy. So it decides where to put growth. So if you need growth in green energy, China invests in that, and that has a tremendously positive impact on the society. While in the West, it doesn't matter what you want. If the billionaire class says no, it's just not going to happen. And they're just I don't know if I can swear on this show, by the way.
Oh, you certainly can, and I would appreciate if you answer.
Please in English, or I won't understand.
Yeah. No, of course. No, I said in the billionaire class in the West, it doesn't matter what we say. They just go on and fucking up our societies, and it's just not stopping. And somebody who says you cannot criticize the government in China, and that is enough for any person who values freedom. Well, I think we don't have much of a right to talk about that stuff when we have young students being thrown into jail because they write an op-ed piece about Israel. I just find that so incredibly hypocrite. It's the same as people who say like, "Oh, MBS is coming in visiting Netanyahu, visiting Donald Trump," and I'm like, what is weird about that? Is a terrorist like Donald Trump above MBS? Or when, I mean, he's meeting Netanyahu, for Christ's sake. He's meeting a genocidal maniac, and we complain about MBS. We have that weird kind of, you can say that, hypocrisy in the West, where we complain about other societies without looking at our own societies. And this is another example. And to be honest, yes, you can criticize China. Peter and I do it all the time. We live in China. Our colleagues at the universities do it. They talk about policy. They talk about what they don't like. But on the other hand, I think, and probably Chinese people know about that better, what you can and cannot say. No, that is true. I think there are some things you cannot say. I don't know what that is. I think maybe more personal political opinions. I don't know, Peter. Maybe you know more about that. But I do know about policy. There's a lot of debate in China.
Yeah, I mean, the research from several years ago was looking at internet comments. You're perfectly free to criticize
Can I freeze you for 1 second, Pete?
Yeah.
Just for 1 second. If you're going to come on our channel and create multiple accounts and put in the same message like everyone's getting caught for doing now,
trolls?
I'm not feeding trolls. I'm just pointing out that there are bot accounts everywhere. So you have to critique the message ever so slightly to make it seem like you actually are not copying and pasting. I just telling you, I catch everything. So good try.
Sorry. Continue.
No, as I was saying, yeah, the research from several years ago is that people criticize the government all they like, and whatever they're criticizing. The thing that gets clamped down on are attempts to organize IRL. Like the government is worried about people forming a kind of alternative organization that potentially could be the base for counter-revolution. So that was the result of research several years ago. I haven't heard anything that has changed.
Something that
to be very honest, if I can add one more thing, to be very honest, one of the reasons Peter and myself feel very good at the university here in China is that we do a lot of work on imperialism and a lot of wars, imperialism, etc., etc. I feel more free and more safe to do that kind of work over here than I would be in the Netherlands and talk about, for example, the colonial history or the currently imperial NATO and that kind of stuff. I think I would not even get a job probably at one of the universities.
Oh, so yeah, totally.
That leads me into I kind of have two things I want to say. One thing that I had heard about that's very cool, and I don't know if you guys know about this, but as somebody who lives in South Florida, we have consistent building and overdevelopment in low-lying areas that are already very water insecure in terms of fresh water and all of these things. And the capitalism is just, they can't build enough. They don't care where the resources are going to come from. They don't care if it's going to be flooded. Whoever's left holding that bag, that's their problem. And something I had heard about in China, maybe you can tell me if this is true, that the government there has invested and subsidized people and subsidized them in a way to encourage people to get out of climate vulnerable places and move to places that are less vulnerable to climate crisis, flooding, whatever the different climate issues are there. And it made sense to me in terms of that there is more of a concern of the collective. So I was just curious if you know anything about that. Like, it just seems like one more thing where they're just going to be practical and reasonable in terms of what's in the best interest for the most people.
Yeah, I haven't read anything about that particularly, but it does very much sound like the Chinese government's MO. I think the way I think about it most on a more abstract level is if you've ever read Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes, he asks, why do the people create this Leviathan, this government, this massively powerful body that could destroy them? Why do they do that? And he's like, well, it's basically because you've got all of these little Leviathans, all these little bullies around in society that would otherwise cause mayhem and terror and dominate other people. And so that's why people create a Leviathan, so that the Leviathan can squish the other bullies so that they can live in peace. Well, basically the Chinese government is more like that Hobbesian Leviathan, where they do at least try to crush down the would-be bullies, the would-be dominators, like the real estate developers who would build tons of property right by the water that's fully expected to be submerged in 10, 15 years because, they won't be holding the bag. IBG, YBG, I'll be gone, you'll be gone. Well, not the person who buys the house, you'll be screwed. So that kind of predatory, selfish behavior tends to be tamped down. I think it's fair to say, like on that kind of abstract level of the difference between the US government and its philosophy and the Chinese government and its philosophy.
I would be curious as to why you think there is so much saber rattling when it comes to Taiwan and why we feel the need to get involved. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious what Taiwan is all about. It's all about the South China Sea. It can't possibly be any other reason because it's all about money and power. I mean, to me, the American empire is pretty transparent in what their intentions always are. That's why we're effing around with Venezuela at the same time, largest crude oil reserve in the entire world. Obviously, the international incident that Pelosi caused a few years back was insane. We're lucky that it didn't end up becoming something a lot worse. So what do you attribute our saber rattling with Taiwan and what that means for the future? Because thankfully, it hasn't become a focus of this administration as of yet. But who's to say, with how crazy things are, that it might not become?
They're focusing on China just in somewhere else. all of this Venezuela stuff, it all comes back to the trade thing and controlling that over China's initiative. But yeah, please explain that, because the Taiwan thing seems like just like a spark or an excuse.
Yeah, I would say that Venezuela. I just wrote an article on our Substack about Venezuela. I suspect that the Venezuela thing, the sudden threat of Venezuela, actually has to do with the preparation of a war with Iran. I think that when the Strait of Hormuz is being shut down, 20% of the oil transfers, I think then the United States will have the empire will have another source for oil. So I think we need to link these things. When it comes to Taiwan, anything, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's Hong Kong, whether it's Xinjiang, the United States will grab anything to try and wreak havoc in China, because China is a contender, and China is a contender that is not as capitalist. I say as capitalist as the United States. So China is, you could say, has these socialist influences and does not allow the billionaire class, the capitalist class, to have free reign. That is threatening. That is another system that's coming up, and the United States is very good at clamping down on alternative systems to maintain the hegemony of capitalism. And I think that is one of the reasons why the United States wants to see China destroyed, like all other societies. And my worry, personal worry, is that the Chinese may still not realize enough how serious the United States is. That is, that the United States really, really wants to destroy it. There is no way out. There's no we can be friends. We can find ways to clear. It's not going to happen. And I think there are still parts of the Chinese political class that still thinks they can be friends. And I think that's not going to happen.
Yeah, there's definitely a liberal ideological current within China that really wants to have capitalist democracy in their country, and there's been this current for quite a while. I think it's fair to say that they were pretty discredited around the time of the Great Financial Crisis, because they viewed the U.S. as the beacon of capitalist democracy, and then with that massive failure and the corresponding ideological failure, that the belief that markets would always self-regulate and it wouldn't be in anyone's interest to allow a massive bubble and dangerous derivatives, et cetera, et cetera. So I think to generalize, I think the liberal ideological current is kind of on the back foot in China. But your question was more about Taiwan and why the U.S. Is so interested. Yeah, I agree with Peter entirely. It's all about the South China Sea, but it's also just about domination. The U.S. ruling class has had total domination of the world since the collapse of the USSR, and they very much like that situation where they can basically give orders to any country in the world, and the pressure that they can exert on every country on the world is essentially such that the government has to accede to U.S. demands. Maybe they can negotiate a little bit, but the U.S. has arbitrary sway over other countries. The problem in their mind with China is that China has developed to the point where that arbitrary sway cannot be exerted. China can say, nope, we're not doing that. And that is the problem. That is the threat in the minds of our psychotic ruling class. And that's the major concern is getting that group of people out of power and because I was just saying to my students the other day, it's like you have a minuscule ideological minority in the US who believes that the world is a game of risk, and they can, they want to play like on a chessboard and dominate the world. Very few people in the US think like that. It's only the foreign policy elite. If you ask an average American on the street, and you tell them, how those people think, they'll react like these are crazy people. That's not at all a mainstream US belief. But those are the people that run the world because they are in control of U.S. foreign policy.
I would agree. I would say that for the most part, the average American doesn't agree with how they're governed. And it's becoming more obvious that we are heading in that direction, which is why I think BRICS is a significant situation. It is taking away from the power structure that the U.S. has been so accustomed to for so long. But you can only poke the bear so many times before you start pushing certain nations that would otherwise be at odds very often and finding themselves agreeing on how can we cross-pollinate. And in the case of Russia and China, it's obvious that our actions over the past, it's hard to say when it really began. I mean, I personally think from a domestic policy perspective, Clinton is the worst president of my lifetime. And from a foreign policy perspective, Bush is the worst president of my lifetime. And the fact that they went back to back over a 16-year period, I would say that you put what happened right in the middle, which was, I believe, the true breaking of the trust with amongst the American people when the judicial branch decided to put the presidential candidate who did not actually win the election into the White House. There has been a division since that moment that has never been rectified or remedied. And so now everything is starting to come to a head. Policies that get passed one year don't get felt necessarily tomorrow. But of all the domestic policies that I say are maybe the absolute worst, and there's a lot of them, you know, if Hillary Clinton had become president instead of Trump, the Trans-Pacific Partnership 1,000% would have been passed. However, the removal of Glass-Steagall by Clinton back in '99 is probably still the most significant in terms of where the banks really became this monolith of power that is too big to fail. And so now I wonder, how are those oligarchs here in the States and oligarchs from around the world who now come to the States to make their fortune off our backs? I always love Elon because he makes his fortune and then says the American people can't have health care, even though he had it when he grew up. Lots of people, especially the Brits, are like that as well. I am wondering, from your perspective, is there going to be a reckoning of sorts with the power structure in this country as a result of BRICS? Do you see that happening in the near future?
Near future, I don't know. I'll be short here. I think near future, no, because basically the only powerful country within BRICS is China. You would need to have the development of unity among the BRICS bloc. And really, if you think of it in the United Nations terms, the G77, the grouping of, you know, the world's majority countries, underdeveloped peripheral countries in the world system, you would need to have a much greater degree of unity and cooperation. And then you would see something like the extraction of so many of these countries from under U.S. domination. And of course, for our psychotic ruling class, they would view that as an existential threat. You know, God knows how they would react, but hopefully they will be on the outs by then.
Yeah, I would say that also we all are, especially those who are from the West, such as ourselves, we are all desperately clinging on to hope. And I think BRICS was one of those things that really, really gave and gives us hope for some kind of alternative. But we had recently some interesting guests on our show, Professor Walden Bello, Professor Patrick Bond, but also Fiorella Isabel and Vanessa Beeley, who we often talk to, friends of the show. And they are all very, you could say, relatively critical, also quite nuanced. And I think we need that. We have been through a period of, I always say, BRICS hallelujah. We were in this hallelujah phase. We have this kind of alternative to imperialism, but increasingly there are more voices that say, okay, it's not really happening. Patrick Bond would even say they're sub-imperialist. That is, they often cooperate with the imperialism, with Western imperialism. And an example of that would be, for example, Vanessa Beeley would say how Russia operates in Syria, often deals with Israel and the United States, but also what we just recently saw in the UN, where China and Russia abstained from what was it, the UNSC, the Security Council resolution, and which pretty much handed over the Palestinians to their killers. And I think this also happened in 2011, by the way, when there was a UNSC vote on Libya. And in that case, you can see that also BRICS nations in the global south often, in some way, shape, or form, cooperate with US, Western Israeli imperialism. So I have become a little bit more critical and nuanced, even though I am happy that there is this kind of alternative and that indeed China and Russia seem to be trading increasingly without the dollar. I think that is the most necessary thing if we want the empire to fall, that the dollar is not the world currency anymore. And yeah, but besides that, like Peter, I don't have my hopes too high at this moment.
Okay. All right. So listen, guys, we're going to do something a little different, right? Because I know you guys want to ask us some questions. So for people who have not been here, who are new or whatever, our guests have their show. And so is that okay, Peter, if we let them ask some questions? Because I know they want to talk to us about they have questions for us, and we were scheduled to go on your show, and then we had to reschedule that, and that's fine, and we will. But I thought if you want to go ahead and do that, we could do that.
Yeah, excellent.
Ever since moving away from the U.S., I feel like I don't have my finger on the pulse over there anymore. So one thing that I've been watching from abroad with some interest is it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm interested in how you guys are viewing this, but it seems like that even normie liberals and Democrats, by normie I just mean people who haven't spent that much time reading books about politics. Maybe they tune into the media, the mass media a lot, but you don't really get a good sense of how the world works by tuning into, the New York Times, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I mean by normies. But it seems like they're getting really radicalized nowadays, like getting real pissed at the Democratic establishment. Am I viewing this with rose-tinted glasses, and you think that this is just a tempest in a teapot, and they'll, the next propaganda line that MSNBC and the New York Times rolls out will sucker them back in? Or do you think that this is the start of something potentially, a break from the Democratic Party establishment? What do you think? How are you guys reading that development?
Peter, you want to go? I'll go. Okay, so I think that the Democrats are dead and just walking around dead, and they don't realize they're dead, and it's just going to slowly become more apparent. Actually, maybe quickly become more apparent to them. And when you're talking about the normie your interest in being optimistic about this, I'm going to turn it back how you responded about BRICS in a way, and be like, okay, well, the normie Dems and their level of interest in actually changing things is directly correlated to their class. Okay, we are in the middle of a major global class war, like what you guys were talking about, and that is really going to be the main difference in the people that are starting to actually wake up, and the normie Dems who just want to feel comfortable and everything is fine as long as Trump isn't there, everything will be fine. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party is largely controlled and comprised by those people, which is why I don't think there's a future there. I think our future is not going to be electoral politics, and anything remotely in electoral politics, I think, will actually come from a split in the Republican Party that leads to an anti-war, anti-corruption, America First type movement, which then working class and labor people could almost identify with more than what we're ever going to see from the elitist Democrats. That's my take. Peter?
I think that there is going to be an America First party. That's inevitably what will come from this, whether it's through the libertarian faction, whether there is a cross-pollination with progressives that are primarily populist and not into what I consider to be the overwoke distractions of social policy. Because let's face it, anything that does not relate to whether you can put food on the table, to me, is generally a waste of time. Pet projects for certain people that are in positions of comfort do not give a damn about whether or not the average person has health care, has education, has clean water, air, the planet's on fire, poisoning our soil. And we're also a very selfish culture. Western culture, by definition, is selfish because, again, it's all about, a free market without any type of a social safety net. We have a welfare state, that we have, which is created in part because you either end up breaking your ass to be successful, and that doesn't get you far. And then you have a welfare state, which in some respects even pays you more to not do anything. So the dependency becomes a really big problem. And so I do think we're heading for some type of a revolution. I don't think it's hit just yet, but this is a class war, bar none. The people that are in the upper classes, it's part of the reason why the issue of Israel is really, it's not red versus blue by any stretch. In fact, there is a lot more movement to end the state of Israel from the libertarian red side of politics than there even is from the blue progressive side of politics. Because the libertarian red side of politics, they're armed. They're armed to the teeth. And we are the one nation in the world that truly embodies the ability to take the law into their own hands if they have to. And so by that measure, I think that the United States is heading in a direction that they may not necessarily want to go in, but they don't have a choice, which is why when I do my solo show, I will cover certain people that generally I would not break bread with, but I've basically been like a man on a mission regarding the Charlie Kirk assassination, because I'm convinced beyond any doubt that that was done by Israel, because this was a person who, it could have been anybody. I mean, we've seen different voices over the years that have had a large platform and they voice their concerns or their ideology for the purpose of making money and gaining power. But when somebody decides that they're not going to go along with the narrative, and they were warned, like the Hamptons meeting, you're going to get along. You're going to go along and get along. And if you're not, well, good luck. And then he was made an example of. Public executions are always done to make an example of not just that person, but also to send a signal to anybody else who's thinking about getting out of line, what's coming for you if you even try it. So I think it's just inevitable that we're heading for this revolutionary moment. And we, again, have to just recognize that from an Eastern perspective, looking at the West, that if you don't take care of your people, eventually they're going to rebel.
That's where we're at here. So that's our answer to the Democrat question.
They're losing the mandate of heaven. You hear that trope in the U.S. or the West all the time, like, oh, this is some exotic Oriental thing, the mandate of heaven. It's like, every society on planet Earth has the same concept, basically, when you piss off the people too much.
I just want to tell you, before I forget, I think you two would also find it very interesting, and your audience, I think, as well. On our channel, we just had recently a conversation with Dr. Aaron Good. It went very well, that conversation, for our small channel. We just have 12K subscribers, but that one was doing pretty well. And Aaron Good really goes deep into that connection, that criminal connection between the U.S. deep state and Israel. And he also goes into the Kirk situation, but also, of course, JFK. Very, very good conversation. So I can really advise you two, but also your audience to have a look. And about the class war, Jen, I think we are on the exact same line when it comes to that. And I think what people often do not realize is that's the way I see it. This class war, and we often have Professor Gerald Horn on, who says the same thing. This class war is friend of the show. He's many times on our show. Love the guy. And he also always says, we are in an international class war. We often forget that. So we believe in good states versus bad states. And then, well, we have now good states rising and they're going to beat the bad states. But Walden Bellow also said, no, you have an elite all over the world and you have a working class, and you either push back against that elite or you don't. It's not a nation war, a war between nations. It's a war between classes, and that war is international. And one final thing I wanted to say to Peter, to other Peter, not my Peter, but Jen's Peter. and I know you guys are not married, so I didn't mean it like that. You know what my fear is, Peter, when it comes to the right and the right wing, that there's a split, America First, anti-Israel, which I also am very enthusiastic about. I think everybody's enthusiastic about that. My fear is with the right, that the Israelis or the deep state, whatever you want to say, they'll find a brown patsy that is going to do some kind of false flag attack, and
Yes.
everybody falls in line. Everybody falls in line. It's an Iranian or a Palestinian or whatever. And that's my fear with the right. They're often very loyal to authority. They're very loyal to the flag. And you just need one brown patsy that does something really, really bad, and they'll fall in line. What do you think?
I disagree. And I
I
disagree.
think I'm going to kick Travers' ass. Travers, pipe down there. Them's fighting words. Sorry.
Anyway, I don't agree, because I think that you get to a point where you just see the system for what it is. I think it's becoming more and more obvious that the distractions again, you got race hustlers in every culture. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. You could be white, you could be black, Hispanic, Asian. It doesn't matter. There's race hustlers all over our political arena. You have the white supremacist types, and then you have the black power types that are completely corporate, like the Al Sharptons of the world. Like, there's no, that you can't, you're cutting it with that knife of, oh, well, they're going to find a brown patsy. It's like, yeah, they were able to do that for a while, but you know what? When the country is suffering economically the way that it is, and now that you had this big expose, the latest expose that came out about where are all these accounts coming from, the fact that the Department of Homeland Security's social media accounts are run out of Tel Aviv, that tells you all you need to know. And that wakes up everybody. They're like, oh, yeah, these things are just distractions. So Jen and I don't see eye to eye on immigration or a number of other social
I
issues.
just want to wait. I want to say something, because I do agree that there's always going to be a brown person to blame for stuff, right? So right now it's a combination of, do we hate the Muslims or the Mexicans crossing the border? But it's brown people nonetheless, right? So there's always going to be that inclination to have people punch down and not be distracted, and be distracted, so we're not looking at who's really fighting, who we're really needing to fight. But I think it's working less and less and less. And I think that is definitely correlating with how bad our economy is and what people are now able to see on their own phones. I think that whole, plus with what happened with however 20 something years with Iraq and Afghanistan and all of that stuff after 9/11, I do think that because we're so able to see everything on our phones, that it's not going to work. I don't think it's going to work as well. I think that it's old already.
You eventually. Okay.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I share the same fear with as Kareem, but I don't have my finger on the pulse of the U.S. And one of the more hopeful things that I see, or maybe just imagine, is that like both of you were saying, this sort of tactic might be losing its potency. Like, if you go back to the Iraq War, they had a year-long propaganda campaign to get everybody behind it. Today, I just have to suspect that a similar attempt would not fall on such gullible ears. Like, there seems to be so much conspiracy theorizing. I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. From a lawyer's perspective, conspiracies happen every single day. Some of them are true, some of them are false, whatever. But the fact that there's so much distrust seemingly throughout U.S. society makes me kind of lean in your more skeptical direction about whether a similar propaganda campaign would work. My only additional fear, though, is that, yes, it's because of our screens, but what if that phenomenon has occurred because the owners of our screens, the people who own the social media companies, were solely focused on profit maximization, and only recently got a much more heavy hand from the government to start censoring things and just, deprioritizing them so that they can, in the future, just stop the spread of what would otherwise be a very convincing argument or what have you. That, I just put that out there as a potential worry.
Well, I think that ship has sailed. Like, I think that we cannot unsee what we have seen. And there are too many avenues now where people who, whether it's whistleblowers or people that are veterans or people that have been on the inside that are coming out and reporting what they're saying. I just think there's too much of it. And they could sit there and keep trying to play whack-a-mole. That's what it is. They'll keep, like, maybe Larry Ellison will keep trying to buy up all the media as fast. It's like, he's like the Onceler from the Lorax, it's like, you just get it all. And it's not working. It's not working. And ultimately they're going to lose.
and this is why they're going to lose. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Revolutionary Change PAC, but we did start a PAC, and we were happy to promote the ASA PAC, which came out recently, but that is a public PAC. We are a super PAC, so we are not able to coordinate directly with the candidates in question, but we do have a mini slate that we have. But more importantly, we have content that has been gaining traction on both Instagram and Facebook. Here's an example of one of the short ads that we recently put out.
Safety and the security of Israel must always be a priority, a high priority of the United States. And as long as I am leader in the Senate, support for Israel's security in the Senate will be non-negotiable.
This is not your place. It's much better in Israel, in Europe.
We are done with AIPAC-funded candidates that put foreign interests ahead of the interests of working Americans. You can help us beat AIPAC at their own game. Please donate to Revolutionary Change now and help us fight fire with fire.
This is interesting. I just wanted to bring it up. I'm sorry. I hate to cover Pete's face, but yeah, I know you're. It's like Mike Wazowski from Monsters Inc. You know, he was so excited to be on the cover, even though he was behind the QR code. So this is somebody mentioning an interesting conversation you had with Jay Shapiro about growing up inside the Jewish American community. So, Pete, are we done with that?
That's also one of the reasons why we wanted to get you on. Yeah.
Okay, so we could talk about that. We have 10 minutes before you have to go. I'm happy to talk about that, and I'm happy to come on your show as long as it's not too early in the morning.
Sure. Great. No, I wanted to have you guys on our show, and we will definitely do that in the near future, because I think both of you are. I deeply respect both of you, the way you deal with Zionism in the United States. You are not. How can you say it? You're not self-censoring. You're very courageous in that sense, and Peter and I, we like that you're very direct. And I think you guys need, you guys deserve a lot of respect for that. So I hope to talk to you a bit more about that in the future. But I maybe as a last final question, I have so many questions. Okay, which one am I going to choose? I'm just going to choose a simple one. What made you guys switch? Maybe what happened that you became so anti-Zionist? Of course, we have the genocide right now. For me, it was 9/11 in those days. It happened for me, but especially in your case, Jen, you are of Jewish descent yourself. What happened? Please tell us.
Sure. So I mean, and we've talked about this on our show about a year before. Yeah, it was October 22. We did a series called Deconstructing Zionism on our show. It was a year before October 7th. You know, for me, Peter wasn't raised Zionist like I was. He wasn't raised to the level that I mean, I was bat mitzvahed in Israel. I spent 6 weeks there on a high school program, planted trees in occupied territory, was used as a tool of ethnic cleansing as a teenager. And I have a lot of rage about this because at the time I didn't realize, you know, I mean, we were lied to and brainwashed and propagandized. And by we, I mean Western Ashkenazi Jews that are raised Zionist. Like we were taught a land without a people for a people without a land. We were taught that there's no such thing as Palestinians. I mean, and the brainwashing is from you don't know anything else. It's not like one thing. It's just constant. And it's the community and the Jewish Community Center and Hillel and B'nai B'rith and all of the different things. It's just like, and I in a very Jewish community. And so I was definitely a Zionist. I wanted to make Aliyah and I was going to live in Israel and I was all with it. And then after, I want to say the second Intifada, when we had the March of Return and the violence was just starting to really get to a whole other level. And I was just paying attention in a different way. And it was also around the same time that BDS was picking up speed. And I was starting to see anti-BDS legislation here that was to me, a complete infringement on our First Amendment rights. So now I'm seeing the tentacles, and how that's affecting our freedom here. So that was happening around the same time as the second Intifada for me. I was paying attention to that. But it was only, I want to say, in 2019, when I was running for Congress the first time, that I officially parted ways with the concept of a two-state solution, where I officially was like, okay, it isn't just a matter of the Palestinians have rights and they need a state, right? It's a matter of Zionism is evil, it's white supremacy, and there should not even be a Jewish state, right? So that, for me, really was even as late as 2019. I'm sad to say. But yeah, it was a combination of things, but really running for office has been very eye-opening for a lot of reasons, but I do a lot of research. I spend a lot of hours a day researching things and reading and speaking to authors and experts, and it just sort of happened for me. But I don't know, did I answer it? Did I answer it well enough? Does that make sense?
Could I follow up? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. No, I was just going to say better late than never, and you definitely make up for it. I mean, you've become so radically anti-Zionist, and together with your co-host, I think again, I want to emphasize, and I will hopefully you guys allow us to post this also on our channel later on, so that our audience gets introduced to you guys. I think you guys deserve a lot of respect for the way you really go against Zionism and keep going. I think that's fantastic. And but I think Peter wants to ask a question.
Yeah, just to follow up, because this is something we asked Jay about, because it's something that similar to what I experienced starting off kind of very far right ideologically as a teenager, that it's not just a matter of it's not a purely intellectual matter of discovering that the beliefs that you were inculcated with actually don't stand up to scrutiny and that the counter arguments seem far superior. There's also this whole relational aspect of the threat of losing friends, family relationships, etc. How are you able to navigate that and deal with that massive emotional threat?
That's definitely more a me question, because I don't think Peter has really had that to the extent at all that I've had that. This is the thing, my herd has definitely been thinned significantly over the past 10 years for a variety of reasons. Whether it was people that would attack me for supporting Bernie Sanders and not getting behind Hillary Clinton, whether it's Zios and the fact that I had a friend who I thought was my friend for 20 years who blew me off after October 7th because I just was not seeing it in that same way. So the herd has definitely thinned. I'm fortunate that my parents are they're with me in this. They're not loud about it, and they want to enjoy their older years without stressing too much. And I don't blame them, because they worked really hard to get where they are, but they're supportive in terms of they understand why I believe what I believe. But yeah, and to some extent it's been hard, but the upside is that I'm meeting the people that are supposed to be my people, and the people that are not my people weren't meant to be my people. And this has really expedited that process. And I'm older than you guys. I'm 54. I am not looking to maintain bullshit, fake, superficial relationships with people. And I really do not spend a lot of time with people to begin with. So I'm good with my herd thinning. I really am. It needed to happen. But yeah, and I'm also very privileged that me speaking out has not had an economic impact on me. And I'd like to think I would do so anyway, but it is definitely from a position of privilege that I can say what I'm saying, which is why I spend so much time saying what I'm saying, because I know that I can, at least until another synagogue calls the police on us again.
I've had to sever relationships with certain people. What you would consider acquaintances or even outright family. I do not hide how I feel. I come from a mixed family. I identify much more with my father's side than my mother's. And I guess I just kind of grew up in an environment where I was always an independent outside thinker. If I sensed that something was wrong, then I just didn't accept it. I never went along to get along. That's not who I am. So when I saw for years, I mean, again, I have that, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, guys. He has another thing because again, it's tomorrow for him.
Yes.
So he has a whole day ahead of himself. Okay.
And so I thought for a long time that was I doing something wrong, but I realized, no, I wasn't. I have members of my family that are Jewish, and I could tell you that they carried a real sense of supremacy about them. And I didn't want any part of it. I didn't want to hear it. It went double for how they spoke about my Italian grandfather and my Irish father. And when that started happening, I said, well, I don't give a flying fuck who these people are. I don't care if I am blood related. I don't want anything to do with them. They can go off and be in their own little stupid enclave. And now, as a result of them biting off more than they can chew, there's going to come a point in the near future where they're going to have to be looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. And you know what? They earned it. They earned it. So that's where we are.
I can relate to that also. I mean, I'm from a mixed family myself. My mother is Dutch and my father is Algerian, and I have half of my family is well, not half. That's not true. But there is a certain segment that are just hardcore racists. I mean, you will not believe severe racists. And for me, it's the same thing. It's end of the show. No more contact, and I break with them. And also, when you are pro-Israel or Zionist, I can't talk to you. I cannot. And the people who say like, oh, you have to respect other people's opinions, I totally agree. I respect other people's opinions. But if your opinion means that you dehumanize a certain segment of humanity, then I'm done. I just can't do it. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's a red line. It's a deal breaker. There is no agree to disagree. You don't get to say that you support white supremacy and killing of brown people and then say, but with just a political difference. No, right. No, we cannot agree to disagree. We're not going to hang out and work together. It's just done.
We have been hovering around a little less than 500 live viewers for most of the evening. And this is probably the one person in the entire chat putting out that message. So
and we don't know that it's even a real person. So
that's true. Yeah. We don't know that. But what we do know is that even if assuming that that person is real, well, then that is going to show you that there is no, it's not even a question about consensus at this point. It's a question of they're all alone and they know it. And the only reason they haven't been dragged through the streets is because they do hold a great deal of financial infrastructure and power in this country. For now. How that's going to unfold in the near future, I am going to reserve judgment. But from what I'm seeing, they're on borrowed time. And so they should be. I have been saying it for probably a year now. We can't save the Palestinians. And after what just happened at the UN, it's even more proof that we can't. However, can we end the Zio state's stranglehold over the American people? That I believe we can stop. And it's becoming more and more obvious by the day that that's where we're heading. And so while some people may be hesitant about who they necessarily want to break bread with along certain ideological lines, as long as it's a class line and it's an anti-Zio line, then I believe that we're going to get there, and we might get there a lot faster than people think. And so that, I think, is a great place to conclude the conversation. Kareem, if you have any final thoughts or anything you'd like to share before you go, we really appreciate you guys coming on this evening.
Not much to add. Thank you for having us on. We are big fans of your show and your battle against Zionism. We hope to talk to you soon on our show. To your audience, we have a lot of conversations about imperialism and Palestine. So come to Bedbeat Media. We have a Substack as well, but also a YouTube channel. And I guess that's it, and hope to talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, we're happy to come on. Not too early in the morning.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Corinne.
you.
Happy holidays.
حبيت القمر طلع القمر اصطناعي شميت الورد طلع الورد بلاستيكي انا حبيت القمر طلع القمر اصطناعي شميت الورد طلع الورد بلاستيكي تكتيكي تكتكتيكي